All right. So get ready because today we are going deep into digital research.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So we are going to be looking at Dr. Peter Vertigem's Methods for Digital Research slides. They're from the Data in Society 2 module.
Okay.
And basically, like we're going to be trying to give you like a clear understanding of the core concepts and methods that are used in digital research. It's like it's a big field. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
But we're going to do our best to break it all down.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be looking at some pretty intriguing questions like what's the difference between digitalized and native digital methods? How can we tell if our data is really reliable, but also valid?
Right.
And also, what does the rise of big data mean for, how we study the world around us? So I think it's going to be a really, really interesting one.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think about digital research as kind of this nebulous thing.
Yeah.
But there are really some pretty concrete foundations
Yeah,
in terms of the methods and the thought process that goes behind it.
for sure.
So I'm excited to unpack that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a good place to start is, some of these fundamental terms that kind of underpin like all research.
Okay.
Right. So we've got things like methodology, epistemology, and ontology. And I think these are words that a lot of people, they hear them and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, what do those even mean?
They sound a bit intimidating, yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So maybe we could start by just like clarifying what those terms mean and how they kind of play a role in shaping a researcher's approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think the place to start is with that, those terms are intimidating because they are really philosophical in nature. And research at its core is a philosophical endeavor. Like how we understand the world really determines the questions that we ask, the way that we go about answering them, the types of data that we collect.
Right.
So these terms are really essential, but they are sort of abstract. And so methodology is really the kind of I think of it as like the strategy that you're going to use to answer your research question.
Right.
So, kind of the methods that you use, the types of data that you collect, how you're going to analyze that data. So that's your methodology.
Okay. So it's kind of like the framework.
Yeah, the framework. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then your epistemology is kind of, how do we know what we know?
Right.
What counts as valid knowledge or evidence or truth?
Yeah.
And so that also really shapes how we go about research.
Okay.
And ontology is the study of being,
Right.
what exists. What are the assumptions that we're making about the nature of the world?
Right. Right. So it's kind of like our worldview in a way.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're thinking about digital research, those same questions apply.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
We have our strategy for how we're going to go about studying this digital world.
Yeah.
We have our assumptions about, what counts as knowledge in the digital world. And we have our assumptions about, what is the digital world? How do we define it?
Yeah.
What are the boundaries of the digital world? And those are things that are constantly being renegotiated, I think, as the digital world changes so rapidly.
For sure. And I mean, I guess to make this a little bit more concrete, like,
Yeah.
can we imagine a situation where we're trying to let's say, figure out how to combat misinformation online.
Sure.
And I think that this is like a really, a relevant and important topic that a lot of researchers are trying to tackle these days. Like, where do we even begin?
Yeah, that's a great example. So, when we're thinking about combating misinformation online, we could think about, okay, what's our methodology? What are the types of data that we might want to collect? So do we want to look at the actual content of the misinformation? Do we want to map the networks of the people who are spreading this information?
Right.
Do we want to interview people to find out, why they believe this information and why they're sharing it?
Yeah.
So those are all kind of different methodological choices that we might make.
Yeah. And I guess each one of those choices kind of comes with its own set of strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where our epistemology comes in. So, if we think that it's really important to understand the motivations of the people who are spreading misinformation,
Right.
then we might lean more towards, qualitative methods like interviews, where we can really get in depth and understand their perspectives.
Yeah.
But if we think that, it's more important to identify the patterns in how misinformation spreads, then we might favor more quantitative methods like network analysis,
Right.
where we can really look at the big picture and see how this information is flowing through networks.
Right. Okay. So it's not just about collecting data. It's about deciding what kind of data will actually give us the most useful insights.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a really important point because I think a lot of times people think that research is just about collecting as much data as possible.
Right.
But it's really about collecting the right kind of data. And
Okay.
that's where kind of the art of research comes in.
Right. Okay. But how do we even know if like the data that we're collecting is like reliable?
Yeah.
And like how do we know if it's actually capturing like what we think we're studying?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the idea of like, is our data good data? There are two kind of key terms to think about. One is reliability,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is validity.
Right.
So reliability is, how consistent are our measurements?
Right.
So if we measure something multiple times, are we going to get the same results?
Yeah.
And validity is, are we actually measuring what we think we're measuring?
Okay.
And that's a much more kind of difficult question to answer
Right.
because, especially in digital research, the things that we're studying are often very complex and very nuanced.
Yeah, for sure. So like give me an example of like how do we test for validity?
So, for example, if we're trying to measure, how much misinformation is spreading online,
Yep.
are we just counting the number of times that a false claim is shared?
Right.
Or are we also looking at the impact that that misinformation is having on people's beliefs and behaviors?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because, just because something is shared a lot doesn't necessarily mean that people are believing it
Right.
or that it's having a real world impact.
Right. Right. So it's easy to kind of like get caught up in the sheer volume of data that's out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
But we have to be really careful to make sure that we're actually like measuring what matters.
Right. And that we're measuring it accurately.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
we're not just measuring something that's easy to measure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's really helpful. And I think this is where things can get, particularly tricky when we're dealing with something as like subjective as misinformation.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Like how do you even measure something like that?
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think that's why in digital research, it's often important to use a mix of methods.
Hmm.
So we might use, quantitative methods to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
But then we also might use qualitative methods to drill down and understand the nuances and the complexities.
Right.
So, for example, we might use surveys to ask people about their beliefs about misinformation.
Okay.
But then we also might want to observe their actual behavior online
Right.
to see if, what they're saying aligns with what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I guess that kind of gets to the heart of the difference between, self-reported data and behavioral data.
Yeah, exactly.
Like what people say they do and what they actually do can be two very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think especially in the digital realm, there's this potential for what we call social desirability bias,
Right.
where people might say what they think they should say
Yes.
or what they think will make them look good
Right.
rather than what they actually believe or do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so even with all of these like tools and these fancy terms, we still have to be like really cautious and really critical about like the data that we're using.
Definitely.
Yeah. But one thing that I'm really curious about is this whole idea of big data,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it seems like everyone's obsessed with it these days.
Of
Like,
course.
does it really live up to the hype? Like, what is it about big data that makes it so special?
So big data is kind of a buzzword,
Yeah.
but it does have some like real implications for research, especially digital research.
Okay.
So when we talk about big data, we're talking about data that has these three characteristics:
Okay.
volume, velocity, and variety.
Okay. What does that mean?
So volume is just the sheer amount of data.
Right.
So, we're talking about terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data.
Oh, wow.
Velocity is the speed at which that data is being generated.
Okay.
So, think about like Twitter,
Right.
where every second there are millions of tweets being generated,
Yeah.
And variety is the different types of data that are being collected.
Right.
So, we're not just talking about text data anymore.
Yeah.
We're talking about images, videos, audio, sensor data, all sorts of different types of data.
Okay. So it's like, it's not just like big in terms of size. It's also like big in terms of like the scope of what it encompasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so big data presents these really incredible opportunities for researchers.
Right.
Because we can now study patterns and trends on a scale that was never before possible.
Right.
So, imagine being able to analyze millions of tweets to see how a particular piece of misinformation is spreading in real time, or, being able to map the connections between users to see how echo chambers are forming.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. But I can't help but think about, that old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Right. Like just because we have a ton of data doesn't automatically make it valuable.
Right. That's a really important point. And I think one of the biggest challenges with big data is ensuring its representativeness.
Okay, what does that mean?
So we need to make sure that the data that we're analyzing is actually representative of the population that we're interested in studying.
Right.
So, for example, if we're only looking at Twitter data,
Okay.
we might be missing out on important conversations that are happening on other platforms.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah.
we need to be really careful to make sure that we're not just looking at a slice of the pie.
Yeah, like we need to make sure we have the whole picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And another challenge with big data is access.
Okay.
So a lot of the most valuable data is actually held by private companies,
Right.
like, Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
And it can be very difficult for researchers to get access to that data.
Right. So it's kind of like we have this like vast like treasure trove of information,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't always get the key to unlock it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating.
Okay, but let's say that we do have access to this massive data set.
Okay.
Like, how do we even begin to like make sense of it all?
Right.
Right. Like data comes in so many different forms these days.
Yeah, that's another key aspect of digital research is the variety of data types.
Right.
So we have, structured data,
Okay.
which is kind of like the neatly organized rows and columns of a spreadsheet.
Right. Yeah.
And then we have unstructured data, which is kind of like the free-flowing text of a social media post.
Right.
And each of those types of data requires a different approach to analysis.
Okay.
So it's kind of like having different tools for different jobs.
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't use like a hammer to fix a leaky faucet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's also semi-structured data,
Right.
which kind of falls somewhere in between structured and unstructured data.
Okay.
So it has some level of organization, but it's not as rigid as a spreadsheet.
Right. Right. Okay. So there's like a whole spectrum
Yeah.
of different types of data that we might encounter.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes digital research so challenging,
Yeah.
but also so exciting, is that we have to be very flexible.
Right.
And we have to be able to adapt our methods to the different types of data that we're working with.
Okay. Yeah. I'm starting to see how all these pieces kind of like fit together.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to like move beyond like data types for a second
Okay.
and like talk a little bit about this distinction between like digitalized and native digital methods.
Okay.
Right? Like is this kind of like the difference between teaching an old dog new tricks?
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Okay, good. All right. Or like having a puppy that's already like tech savvy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so digitalized methods are basically taking traditional research approaches, like, surveys or interviews,
Yeah.
and adapting them for the online world.
Right.
So it's like taking a paper survey and turning it into an online form.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of like taking the old methods and just giving them like a digital makeover.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But native digital methods are specifically designed for studying digital phenomena.
Okay.
So they take advantage of the unique characteristics of the digital environment
Right.
to gather and analyze data.
So it's kind of like they're more like born in the digital age.
Exactly.
Right.
Like they're digital natives.
Right. Okay. So like, can you give me some examples of like what a native digital method might look like?
Yeah. So, one example is social media network analysis.
Okay.
So this is where we can actually map out the connections between users
Right.
and see how information is flowing through these networks
Right.
and identify, who are the influencers within these networks.
Okay. So it's not just studying what people say they do online, but what they actually do.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And it's like having a backstage pass to the inner workings of online communities.
Right.
And it's not just limited to social media.
Right.
We can use, web scraping techniques to collect data from websites. We can analyze online forums to understand public discourse on a particular topic.
Mhm.
We can even track the spread of misinformation in real time.
Wow. This is starting to sound like something out of like a spy movie or something.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're like uncovering these hidden patterns and tracking online movements.
Right.
Like maybe even predicting future trends.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about digital research is that we're constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible
Right.
and using these digital tools to unlock new insights into human behavior.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been like an incredible deep dive so far, I think.
Yay.
We've laid like a really good foundation.
Yeah.
We've explored some like really key concepts.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm really eager to like hear more about, specific research methods and how they're being applied to like actually tackle these real world problems.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to keep going.
Me too, yeah. Got lots more to unpack.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into digital research.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Yeah, we just, we laid some serious groundwork
Yeah.
about digital research, like
Love
all the theories and the concepts.
Yeah, all the building blocks.
Right, exactly. But now it's time to like roll up our sleeves and like really explore the actual methods that, researchers use to like decode this digital world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to reiterate that, this isn't just like one thing that you do, right? It's
Okay.
not just like
Right.
a survey or an interview. Like we've got this incredible toolkit at our disposal.
Right.
It's just about figuring out like what's the right tool for the job.
Exactly. It's not a one size fits all,
Yeah.
situation. So like where do we even start with all of this?
Yeah. So I think we could start by, we made this distinction between digitalized and native digital methods.
Right.
And we kind of touched on that briefly. Maybe
Yeah.
we can unpack those a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So, like we said, digitalized methods are like taking those traditional approaches
Mm-hmm.
and giving them like a digital makeover, right?
Yeah.
What are some examples of like how that's being done right now?
Yeah, totally. So, imagine that we're studying online communities.
Okay.
So a digitalized approach could be using online surveys to gather information about the demographics of the members, their
Yeah.
interests, their experiences within the community.
Okay.
And that can be, a really efficient way to collect a lot of data quickly.
Right, right. Okay, so I see how that could be useful. But what about those native digital methods?
Yeah.
Like what makes them so unique?
Yeah, so I think native digital methods are all about harnessing the power of the digital environment itself.
Okay.
Right. So instead of just asking people about their online behavior, we can actually observe it directly.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, social media network analysis.
Right.
This allows us to map out the connections between users, see how information spreads, identify who are the influencers in the network.
So it's like we're not just studying what people say they do online,
Yeah.
but what they're actually doing.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
It's like having this backstage pass to the inner workings of these online communities.
Right. Okay. And I mean, I guess it's not just limited to like social media, right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, we can use like web scraping techniques to collect data from websites,
Okay.
analyze online forums, like to understand public discourse on a particular topic.
Okay.
Even track the spread of misinformation in real time.
Oh, wow. So this is starting to sound like something out of like, a spy movie.
Yeah, a little bit, right.
Right. We're like uncovering these hidden patterns
Yeah.
and like tracking online movements, like
Yeah.
maybe even like predicting future trends.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes digital research so exciting is that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
really constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible
Okay.
and using these digital tools to unlock new insights into human behavior.
Okay. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. But I want to like, not get too carried away with the
Sure.
high tech stuff, right?
Okay.
Like what about like the more traditional like research methods?
Yeah.
Like, interviews.
Right.
Like do those still have like a place
Yeah,
in the digital world?
Totally, yeah. I think interviews are incredibly valuable for understanding, the human side
Oh.
of digital phenomena, right? So imagine we're studying like online activism.
Right.
We could analyze tweets and social media posts to
Uh-huh.
kind of see how, a particular movement gained momentum,
Okay.
but to really understand like the motivations and the experiences of, the activists who are involved. We need to talk to them
Yeah.
directly.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's where interviews come in.
So it's kind of like we're combining like the big picture view that like quantitative data can give us with like the more kind of in-depth understanding
Yeah.
that like qualitative methods can provide.
Exactly, yeah. It's about using all the tools that we have
Right.
to get like a more complete and nuanced picture
Okay.
of the digital world. And I think another great example of that is like online ethnography.
Okay.
So this is where researchers actually immerse themselves in these online communities,
Okay.
right? So, they participate in the forums,
Right.
they observe the interactions, they conduct interviews to really understand like the culture and the dynamics of these virtual spaces.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they're becoming like digital anthropologists.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Right. Studying like the tribes of the internet.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm also like thinking about those unobtrusive methods
Yeah.
we talked about earlier. Can you give me like some more like concrete examples of like those in action?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say we want to study how people react to a particular type of online content. So it could be a news article or it could be a social media post.
Okay.
So instead of just directly asking them, what do you think of this?
Right.
We can actually use eye tracking technology.
Okay.
See where their attention is drawn,
Right.
how long they dwell on certain elements.
Wow.
What kind of emotional responses the content evokes.
So we're kind of getting like insights into their subconscious reactions
Yeah.
without them even realizing it?
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the advantages of these unobtrusive methods is
Right.
that they bypass all those potential biases
Right.
that come with self-reported data.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And another example is analyzing online search queries,
Okay.
right? So what people are searching for online
Right.
can tell us a lot about their interests, their concerns, maybe even their anxieties. Right, right.
So by tracking these queries over time, we can identify emerging trends,
Okay.
predict future behavior, gain a deeper understanding of public sentiment.
Okay, that's starting to sound a little bit like Big Brother-ish.
Yeah, a little bit, right.
Right. So are there any ethical considerations?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like that we need to keep in mind when we're using these unobtrusive methods.
Yeah.
Ethical considerations are paramount in any type of research.
Right.
But especially in the digital realm where data is so readily available.
Okay.
So, we need to be transparent about how that data is being collected and used.
Right.
And we always need to prioritize the privacy and well-being of the individuals involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right?
Yeah.
Just because we can collect certain types of data
Yeah.
doesn't mean we always should,
Right.
right? We have a responsibility to use these powerful tools ethically and responsibly.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of curious, how do researchers actually choose which methods to use?
Yeah.
Right? Is there a set of guidelines, or is it more of an art than a science?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think there are some general principles that kind of guide method selection, but ultimately it comes down to the specific research question,
Right.
the resources that are available, and the researcher's own expertise and judgment.
So it's kind of like being a chef,
Yeah, totally.
choosing the right ingredients and techniques
Exactly.
to create a delicious dish or something.
Yeah, and I think a good chef,
Okay.
a skilled digital researcher knows how to blend different methods
Got it.
to create this rich and flavorful understanding of the digital world.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been an incredible exploration of this diverse toolkit that's available to digital researchers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've talked about everything from analyzing social media networks
Yeah.
to conducting online interviews
Mm-hmm.
to using eye tracking technology to understand people's subconscious reactions.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think about all these different ways
Right.
that we can study human behavior
Yeah.
in this digital age.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, what about the future of digital research?
Yeah.
What are some of the emerging trends or challenges that researchers are grappling with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest both challenges and opportunities is the rapid pace of technological change.
Right.
Right. So, new platforms and technologies are constantly emerging.
Right.
And researchers need to be able to adapt their methods to kind of keep up.
Yeah, it's we're trying to hit a moving target.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Just when we think we figured out how to study one platform, a new one pops up and we got to start all over again.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's what makes digital research
Correct.
so challenging, but also so exciting.
Right.
Is that constant evolution.
Okay.
And I think another challenge, and this is something that we touched on before, is the ethical implications of collecting and using digital data.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So, as we delve deeper into this digital world,
Yeah.
we need to be mindful of, the potential impact on individuals' privacy, autonomy, and well-being.
Right. It's kind of a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, I think AI and machine learning are definitely like game changers in digital research.
Okay.
They allow us to analyze these massive data sets,
Right.
identify patterns, generate insights that like would be impossible for humans to do on their own.
Right.
Right.
So it's kind of like having like a super-powered research assistant.
Totally. Yeah. And those capabilities are only going to like, grow more sophisticated
Right.
in the years to come. So imagine, using AI to analyze millions of social media posts
Right.
to track the spread of misinformation or, to predict future trends in consumer behavior.
Wow. Yeah. The possibilities are truly endless.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really exciting.
But like, as you mentioned earlier, we also need to be mindful of like the ethical considerations.
Right.
Like if AI is making decisions about like what data to collect and how to analyze it,
Yeah.
like how do we make sure that those decisions are like fair and unbiased?
That's a crucial question. And it's something that researchers are really grappling with right now.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that these technologies are being used responsibly and transparently?
Okay, yeah. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Well, this has been like a fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, we've explored like a wide range of like digital research methods. We've delved into some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to kind of like wrap up this deep dive
Okay.
by like, reflecting on what we've learned and like looking ahead to the future of this dynamic field.
Yeah. I think those are some great points to kind of synthesize all this information and think about where we go from here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm ready to dive into those final reflections.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, stay tuned as we wrap up our exploration of digital research. Welcome back. We've been on this like incredible journey through the world of digital research. It's amazing to see like all the different approaches and tools, that researchers are using to understand how we live in this digital age.
Yeah, it's like we've got this map to help us navigate online behavior. And it's vast and it's always changing. I mean, we've talked about big data, online ethnography. Digital research is so dynamic and it's changing so fast.
Right.
It's been really cool to see behind the scenes, like how researchers are keeping up with technology.
Yeah, totally.
We were just talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Right.
What do you think about those and like the future of digital research?
Well, I mean, AI and machine learning are game changers.
Right.
The ability to analyze so much data and to
Yeah.
see patterns that humans can't see.
Right.
That's incredible. Like having a superpowered research assistant.
Exactly. And it's just going to get more sophisticated as time goes on. Imagine AI analyzing tons of social media posts to track like misinformation.
Right.
Or like to tailor education based on how different people learn. The possibilities are mind-blowing.
AI could become like a collaborator, not just a tool.
Right.
We're on the cusp of a whole new era in research.
Yeah.
But AI isn't perfect.
Well, yeah.
We still need to use it ethically and thoughtfully.
Exactly.
It's powerful, but we have to be careful.
For sure. Like AI algorithms can be biased.
Right.
We've got to make sure that we're using AI in a way that doesn't violate people's rights or like, our values.
With all this new technology, we have to be critical and ethical. So as we finish up our deep dive into digital research, what are some things you want our listeners to take away?
I hope people realize how diverse and complex digital research methods are. Like, it's not just about numbers or looking at social media. Researchers carefully choose their tools and approaches depending on their question.
And those tools are diverse, right? We've got big data analysis, interviews, real-time observations. It's all about understanding this digital world completely from all angles.
Exactly. And I also want people to be excited about the future of digital research. This field can change how we think about human behavior, social interactions, and even society itself.
It's like we're explorers in a brand new land, and there are discoveries waiting around every corner. But we have to think ethically about what we're doing.
Right. Digital researchers have to protect people's privacy and well-being. We need to be upfront about how we collect data, how we use data, and we have to think about the big picture. How will this research affect society?
Totally. As our world becomes more digital, it's super important to understand how research works and how data is being used.
Couldn't agree more. I hope our listeners stay curious, keep learning, and talk about the ethics of digital research.
This has been amazing. My understanding of digital research has grown so much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into, well, whatever fascinating topic we choose. See you then.